Who's Jean-Pierre? What is that?
Jean-Pierre is our interpreter.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right. Sonja, here's your kid. Okay. Smile for the camera.
You can sit down. You can sit down.
Sit.
Okay, we're going to sit down now.
Yeah. Thank you for the photographers. Please take your seat so that we can start the press conference. Thank you for being here. Let me introduce to you the people who sit at this table. Please, from the far hand, two of the producers of the movie, Brian Kennedy and Peter Brandt, then two actresses of the movie. Miranda Otto, who before Tommy Lee Jones worked with directors such as Peter Jackson, Steven Spielberg, and John Moore. Then Sonja Richter, a Danish actress. We saw her in Open Hearts by Susan Bayer, and she won a prize at the Monte Carlo Television Festival for her performance in the Danish TV series Performances. Next to me, Michael Fidzgerald, who got the idea of the movie and who started his career as a producer with John Huston. And he knows Cannes very well because he came with The Pledge by Sean Penn and with the first movie, of course, of Tommy Lee Jones, The Three Burials. Next to him, Luc Besson, French director and producer, and he knows Cannes very, very well since Le Grand Bleu, and he was also the producer of the first movie of Tommy Lee Jones. And in the center of the table, of course, the two stars of the movie, Hilary Swank, winning of 2 Oscars of Best Actress for Boys Don't Cry and $1 Million Baby, and next to her, his partner and his director, Mr. Tommy Lee Jones. Best Supporting Actor Oscar for The Fugitive and Best Actor Award at the Cannes Film Festival for his first movie. Tommy Lee Jones, first question is of course to you. This time you co-write the script of the movie. In which way was it important for you to be part of the process of the writing?
Well, yes, of course. By the way, the Three Barrels of Melquiades Estrada was my third movie. And yeah, it's important. As a director and a writer, it's important to have me as an actor. And it's particularly beneficial as a producer. Having any 3 of those jobs makes the 4th one a breeze.
Why do you think Hilary Swank was the ideal actress to be the character, to play the character?
Oh, Hilary's... well, it took me as long as 5 seconds after meeting her to understand that she's perfect for the role, physically, mentally, emotionally, and I suppose even ethnically. She's from Nebraska and Iowa, and not afraid of a horse or a mule. It was such. I mean, I've been looking for a long time, and it was an enormous relief to meet Hilary at that Italian restaurant there in Beverly Hills, and have that burden off of my shoulders.
Hilary, what was the most difficult thing to achieve for you in that movie?
Well, in the beginning, I thought that it was going to be riding the horses and learning how to plow and plow behind mules nonetheless. This isn't, you know, tractors and what we have nowadays. Having 2 mules and a plow, as well as driving that carriage with the mules. But actually, believe it or not, I think it was braving the elements that we were working in. Okay. It was positive because it allowed us the opportunity to understand what these characters were actually, these people were living day in and day out. And at the end of the night, we got to go home and have a bed and a warm meal and a hot bath, and they didn't get that luxury. So it really was an extraordinary challenge, to say the least. When it was cold, it was freezing. When it was windy, you had sand in your ears and your nose and your mouth and this thick in your hair, and we weren't washing our hair because our characters didn't wash their hair. So the elements, I would say, mostly.
Mm-hmm. Michael, when you read the book, why do you think it was an ideal material for Tommy Lee Jones?
Because Tommy understands that world better than anyone I've ever known. I knew that he would love the character of Briggs, I knew that he would understand the landscape, and I knew that he would love it. I hoped he would love it.
Luc, how would you define your collaboration with Michael Fidzgerald and Tommy Lee Jones?
Well, I'm the one who do the less at this table. I'm just following an artist, which I love, which is Tommy. He's an artist. There's a few in the world now, not so much, and it's just my honor to follow him when he called. And the funny thing is, the first movie was the relationship between U.S. and Mexico, and this one is about how United States starts, and both times they call a French.
And yet we are here.
Well, we called them before, too, in about 1876. Or 1776. Thank God.
First question, there.
Hi. Let me stand up, it's not easy.
Yes, it's better, thank you.
Hi, Fabian Weinthal for Vanidades Magazine from the United States and Latin America. I have a question for Tommy Lee Jones and Hilary Swank that is kind of double. What Tommy Lee Jones, the actor, thinks of Tommy Lee Jones, the director, and what Tommy Lee Jones, the director, thinks about Tommy Lee Jones, the actor, and what Hilary Swank thinks about Tommy Lee Jones, the actor and the director.
Well, as a director, I can tell you that I do everything I tell myself to do. Well, and as an actor, I listen very carefully.
Tommy Lee, as we all know, is extraordinary, not only as an actor that we've seen over decades of time, but it lends itself perfectly into his foray into directing. He has a shorthand and understanding of acting, so it's just a few words that he uses to get the understanding across to his actors, to his crew, what they're needed to do to help tell the story that he's trying to get on the screen. It was one of the more fun experiences I've had. It was extraordinary.
Madame?
Uzbekistan, Seraton TV, Elena. Question to Luc Besson. Dear Luc, why do you think this story is so important for European and Eurasian audience to bring here?
It's a vision of America that we don't know. So for me, it looks like a Kurosawa film. It's very exotic, you know. We didn't know. I mean, I didn't know it was so hard and so difficult, and so I think it's important for us to see how it starts. We know about the American dream and we love it, but it's good to have the truth also, you know, before the dream.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. True.
Sure.
Hi, Jan Lomholt from Svenska Dagbladet in Stockholm. I'd like to know a little bit about any possible research you did on the settlers of the time. I see that you have, although not everyone have lines in the film, I mean, you have quite an international cast. You have a Dane, you have an Australian, you have a couple, you have David Densik, who is Swedish-Danish. There is, of course, a great mix in this time in America of people, and they spoke, some of them didn't even speak English and all that. How much did you go into this kind of research and how it was at the time?
We read a lot of books and paid particular attention to the photographers of the day. There was one book dealt with specifically the subject of insanity, principally among women in the 19th century. It was a book from which we learned about various treatments for various illnesses, For example, it was commonly thought that the best cure for schizophrenia was soak in ice water for 8 hours. And it got worse. The photographic record was very valuable to us as well. The architecture of western Nebraska. How do you build a house in a place where there are no trees? And it's hundreds of miles to the nearest sawmill. In other words, how do you build a house without lumber? Well, you build it without dirt. You dig a hole in the ground. And not a real inviting place for a woman of the Victorian era. I don't know about research. Most of our research was photographic. It's not real research. We're not curing polio. We're just looking into the past in every way we can.
Monsieur?
I didn't understand that question.
About the cast?
What did you say?
Different nationalities in the cast, Tommy.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the United States has been, well, it was intended to be, has been, and is, and will continue to be a melting pot. We come from everywhere. So it's not unusual to have people from other parts of the world appear in the 19th century in the West. It's not unusual. It's kind of normal. It's real. That's why we did it.
And Scandinavians were very, very well represented in the first move out into the frontier.
Yeah, that's why there's so much cheese in Wisconsin.
But it's not French cheese.
No.
Monsieur?
Yes, this is Parviz Jahed. I am the editor of Sinai magazine. And my question is to Mr. Tommy Lee Jones. Your film was a fantastic Western film. I loved it. It's very strong in terms of narrative style and visual style. But the question is, in a time that Western films, Western genre is almost dead, and except a few producers like Luc Besson are interested in producing genre in this genre. How much was it challenging and risky for you to make such an artistic and melancholic Western film?
No, we just made the best movie we can. You were using the word genre. I don't understand that word. And you used the word almost dead. I don't know what you were... What was he talking about? Westerns. I don't really know what that means. We were trying to make the best movie we could. It happened, and it's a consideration of the history of westward expansion, a way of looking at what the school children of America learn when the subject of manifest destiny comes up. Taking a consideration of that theme in the study of history. Salud.
Bless you. Bless you.
Merci. Thank you.
So that's what it was. We didn't think about Westerns or genre or anything other than making a movie about American history from our own point of view.
Monsieur?
This is Iqbal from Bangladesh, the Daily Pratham Alo, my daily's name. My question is to Hilary Swank. I think you're looking gorgeous, and you are beautiful too.
Thank you.
And I thought that you are not that beautiful in your cinemas.
Hey.
So you think you should do more romantic movies than the tough girls, You are always successful as a tough girl, I think. Boys Don't Cry, $1 Million Baby, now the Homesman, you're also tough. You think you love tough roles in films?
I like real people. I like real women. It's obviously subjective what people find pretty or not. I've had a lot of people say Maggie Fitzgerald or Mary B. Cuddy, Maggie Fitzgerald from $1 Million Baby or Mary B. Cuddy in this film are beautiful because they're natural and they're real. So it really is a subjective, I think, term to say what's pretty and what's gorgeous. But thank you.
You're gorgeous. Still, you are gorgeous. Thank you.
Thank you.
I like the still.
Well, I'd like to say something before we go any further. I want to thank you all for asking these questions in English and for being patient enough to listen to us answer in English. We know we are in France, and we appreciate your use of English in this conference.
Je parle français, mais
I do speak French,
so you don't want to hear me.
but I only speak very little French.
We'd spend the whole conference with me going, je suis heureuse.
Merci. Monsieur devant.
Hugues Daillet, Belgian TV. It's a question for Hilary Swank and Tommy Lee Jones. I have a feeling that in the past, Hollywood studio can produce this kind of great movies, and nowadays it's not Hollywood. We are happy to have this movie, but how do you explain it seems impossible to have a deep, profound movie like this in the Hollywood system nowadays, and to have female role like this in the Hollywood system?
As a filmmaker, do you want to answer first, or do you want me to?
Oh, I'll answer first. I don't mind. As just as a person, our lives are a never-ending search for originality. And we were lucky enough to find some in this movie. We don't think of systems. We don't think of ourselves, I dare speak for all of us, as being in or out of any system. We're a system of our own. We can get that one up and running and wind up in a place like this, we're happy as can be.
Yeah, and I would say I became an actor because I love people, and I love what makes us similar and what makes us different. I always get the opportunity to learn about humans in a deeper way from each character that I get so blessed to play. I'm always looking for the real. I'm looking for the real, and I think, as you mentioned before, that some of the characters that I've played are I mean, the word that gets thrown around a lot is intense, strong, and this character is yet another one of them. She has fortitude. She has good morals. I think we've lost a lot of virtues in our world today, so it was nice to play a character who had strong virtues. But to answer your question about studio system and what they make and what they don't make, I think it's ever changing. You know, one minute they want comic book and big movies, and the next they want real. You know, the independent feature started long ago with Harold and Maude and movies like that, but they really started getting strong in 2000, and we're now in 2014, and each studio has their independent arm. So I think hopefully we can continue, thanks to Mike Fidzgerald and Luke and Brian and Peter, who were willing to take this story and see Tommy Lee's vision through to be a part of films like this. Because for me as an artist, it's really all I'm interested in my heart.
If I can just add something, what she said is sometimes a film like this one is difficult to adapt to a big, huge studio machine. That's why since a couple of years, Sony did Sony Classic, and then Fox did Fox Searchlight. So they adapt themselves. It's just the tool of distribution is just too big. So they share, but they continue. You know, they do the big popular film in one, and they do the film more difficult or more different to the other one. But they didn't stop doing that.
They didn't stop, but we would never have gotten this picture made in that system. Excuse me. If we hadn't come to Luc Besson, we would not be here. Thank you.
I try to defend your country.
It's indefensible.
Thank you. Monsieur là-bas.
Hi, I never get to use my middle name, so I'm Jason Lee Gorber from Cineplex.com and Twitch Film. one of the biggest challenges of this film, I think, is the shift in tonality, how we go from something quite broad and comedic to something quite tragic. During the writing and shooting stage, performance stage, if we could discuss that. And were there specific film references that you drew from on the film? You talked about using literature and historical novels, but were there particular movies that you looked to try to do this very unique Western, which shifts in its tone quite dramatically?
No. I made reference to every movie I've ever seen, trying to stay away from some of them and trying to emulate the better qualities of others. Really, the work of Donald Judd and Joseph Albers were important to me practically every day. They're not film directors. I can't, you know, God, my friend Norman Mailer said that good artists borrow or copy. Good artists copy, and great artists steal. And I steal from anybody that's got anything worth stealing, to be specific.
And in terms of the shift of tone, I'm going from comedy to drama to all the intense emotions that are going through. How did you keep it all straight through the process of making it?
Well, having been a part of writing the screenplay, it wasn't hard to remember what the tone was supposed to be and how it was going to change tomorrow. How do we keep it all straight? Well, it wasn't straight because we didn't shoot in chronological sequence. We had to know what we were doing when the sun came up every day. And the question of tone was important, subtle, predetermined, and we kept it straight by reading the script.
Having a good leader like you.
Yeah, and paying attention to, yeah, I mean, that's just what we do. That's part of filmmaking. There's the idea of continuity, I suppose, is what you're talking about. And you have to be aware of it, not only physically, but thematically. How's that sound, Lou? Pretty good? Okay.
Mademoiselle? No, it's okay.
Touch it? Oh, okay, here we go. First of all, I want to say to you, as a woman, thank you for the strong performances that you've given and the beautiful array of complexities of the female character. And I think you're beautiful in every film you make.
Thank you.
Stunningly, ridiculously beautiful.
Thank you very much.
And to you, I as an American, I know a lot about the kind of the land grab and the homesteading. Yeah. And there were a lot of women homesteaders who did it on their own, and what they, you know, it was really difficult, but they really did need a husband, and I felt that very strongly in this telling of the story. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think the film says about how we settled and how we kind of took the land, you know, from the Native Americans, and whether that was a consideration in the tone, and I mean in the story. I haven't read the book, but I found that to be sort of a very subtle undercurrent that, you know, people might take literally, that, oh, this film is being cruel to has a disapproving view of Native Americans, but what I felt was more about the kind of conflict of that settling of this part of the country. I wish you could talk about that a little bit.
Who's the question for?
For you.
For me?
Yeah.
Well, I won't try to hide the fact that a consideration of American imperialism on the west side of the Mississippi River is an underlying theme. But I'll let the movie speak for itself. But yeah, we thought about that before we wrote the screenplay, while we were writing it, and while we were shooting it.
Mademoiselle?
I'll let the movie speak for itself on that to any greater degree.
Giovanna Grassi, Corriere della Sera, Italy. I have two short questions for Hilary and for Tommy Lee Jones. I want to use your quotes. Why, in your opinion, this lady so strong, sensitive, fragile, hangs herself?
I could not understand.
No. This is for Hilary. For you,
why is she all of those things?
No.
Yeah.
Why does this lady, who is all those things, why does she hang herself?
Oh, well, you know, I'm not one to try and tell you what you should feel when you watch a movie or what you should make out of any certain thing. I would say that from my point of view, though, we're talking about a time that was extreme in every way. It was a hard time, a hard place to live. The elements, the idea of doing it alone, the idea of wanting a partner to share it in, someone to love, someone to have her back when so she doesn't have to be strong all the time, which Mary B is. Sorry, also, Mary B is a woman who cares enormously about the people around her. I think she loves these women and wants the best for these women. And when she sees them struggling in the way that she has, when they're crying, you know, it makes her cry. It makes her weep. She feels it, feels what they're feeling intensely. And how much can a person take? Ultimately, how much can a person take? So that's kind of the best way I could answer that question.
And the question for Tommy Lee Jones was, the landscape in your movies are always important, in the first and especially in this. At the end of the movie, your man telling us that he's going back to West. There is a particular meaning in this or not?
Oh, the movie speaks for itself. I mean, it's pretty clear. I don't know how I could elaborate on the last line in the movie. We are headed west, goddammit, if it hair lips the goddamn devil. Now, I don't know how to be more, or how to express the impetus of the movie. It's thematically true to the movie. He hasn't, the character hasn't really met with a warm welcome in so-called civilization. And I believe we get a glimpse of how uncivilized civilization can be. And he resumes his role as the cutting edge of the westward movement. It makes perfect sense to me.
Mademoiselle?
Karen Batt for the Huffington Post. Question for Tommy Lee Jones. Gorgeous movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, especially that fire scene. I really love that too. And I was curious why Miss Cuddy was so desperate to get married, considering what she saw happen to people who get married and have children. And in your press notes, you say, the reason you explore the female condition is because I think it's the origin of the female condition today. And I was wondering if you could say more about the subtext in this film about what marriage and children mean for women today, as I see this note here.
Oh.
If that is really what you meant to say.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. I don't think there's a woman in this room that has never felt objectified or trivialized because of her gender. And there's a reason for that. There's a history of that, and I think that's an interesting theme.
Peter Paul Huth, German television. I have a question for Mr. Jones. I was struck by the idea and the irony of normally you have the move towards west, and here you go back east in your film. And it made me think about this tension between the West and the civilization. Could you elaborate on that?
I don't know how to elaborate. The journey in this movie is the inverse of what you usually see in a movie that has wagons and horses in it. And the subject matter is women, insane women. Not so-called heroic men. That's just our point of view. I think all our themes harmonize and come together. And I'm not sure I can remember the question.
Instead of going
civilization and the wilderness.
Civilization and wilderness? Yeah, something to consider, something to think about. Interesting to shoot, that so-called disparity.
Monsieur?
Hi, Mike Roddy from Reuters. Just following up on the question that was brought up over here about the manifest destiny and all that. You portray Indians in the movie, Native Americans, and I'm just wondering if you're afraid that how this will come across, given all the attention that's been paid to that subject over the years and the crime of America on that score, that you'll be seen as having stereotyped the Indians yet again as the bad guys.
I don't have any concern about that whatsoever. Those people were all Native Americans. They were of Puebloan descent. They all claimed to be expert riders. None of them, not one of them, could ride one side of a horse. But they did look like Pawnees. The costumes were thoroughly researched. So I was really proud of the fact that they looked like Pawnees, and not ashamed of the fact that they were considered by our characters to be potentially homicidal. We're not bending the truth at all, or stereotyping anybody. That's the last thing we want to do.
Madame?
Nicole Gabriel, Jeune Cinéma. My question is for the interpreters of the three grieving women. A psychiatrist disorder is very difficult to interpret when you don't know what it is. So Juliette Binoche did it in a wonderful way for Camille Claudel. So how did you, maybe the three of you, how did you manage to give such a moving performance?
Okay, go first, Miranda.
Sonja, Miranda.
Okay, I think the three of us really had different approaches to it because our stories were so different. The way that we lost our minds, I guess, is very different, and so I guess I was really interested in. I talked to some psychiatrists and psychologists about this particular postpartum psychosis. And there were particular things in the script that were real triggers for me, particular words and ideas. And also there was a book that Tommy gave some of the cast of the pictures of women from this period suffering from different mental disorders. And I found those photos really revealing and chilling, in a way that you can really see people's souls in them. And then another part's just imagination.
Sonja?
Yes. Yeah, for me it was mainly I tried to find a place in myself where I could feel it. As you say, you don't have a diagnosis, and I don't know if you can really use a diagnosis even if you got one. So I mainly worked with my own imagination and trying to get sound and feel of it, and then the pictures that from the book that Miranda mentioned too. So I tried to go from outside and in, and then from inside and out. So it was a special job, but a very great and very fun experience, especially with Hilary and Tommy. They're so amazing artists. So I felt safe to go out there on a crazy job.
Thank you. Mademoiselle, au fond.
Hello, I'm Sarah Nabil from Egypt. My question is to Mr. Tommy and Miss Henry. I want to ask Mr. Tommy about working as a director. Was it more hard than being an actor, or they are the same for you? And who was the actor or actress who was hard to you to deal with and to get him into the character from the cast? To Henry, it's nice to meet you here, and I just want to ask you about the most difficult part for you in this movie, and how was working with Mr. Tommy as a director? Thank you.
Well, could you divide that question in two?
Your question is about being a director. Is it more difficult than being an actor or no? This is number one. And two, how was working with the actor and the actress, and who was the most...
Let's just answer one question at a time, okay?
Okay. Fine.
Being a director and an actor at the same time is not much of a problem for me. It's kind of a luxury. Well, I don't mean kind of. It is a luxury that I appreciate. And what was the next question? Do you remember?
Was it like working with all your directors?
Yes. Your microphone broke down.
Yeah, working with them, the cast, who was the most hard actor or actress to get him into the character for you as a director?
The most difficult?
Yeah.
No, I didn't have any difficulty with any actor on this movie. We were very careful about putting a company together, and we looked for people who can read, and I didn't have any trouble with anybody, really. It was a real joy. The difficulty was the weather, but it wasn't, and not the people.
I think I already touched on what it was like to work with Tommy Lee as a director because of his extensive experience as an actor as well. Although I'll say it again, he's extraordinary because I can't say it enough. And as far as what was the most challenging, I would say trying not to mess it up because it was such a brilliantly written script. I just tried to get out of the way and like I said, not mess it up. You come onto something that you can visualize, and you're working with people that you admire and who inspire you. And I think you just try every day to bring your best to the set in whatever form that may be. And sometimes it's unexpected, and you just try and be in the moment, and you go with it. There was so much to play with, and I guess just trying to really make sure that I was utilizing everything that was there in which to play, and not play at one note, and to find all those multifaceted emotions that came to the character.
Hello, from Spain, from Fila 7. My question is for the director, Mr. Tommy Lee. How do you choose the music on the movie? Because it seems to me like the songs are like the real voice of your characters, the character of Hilary and yours. And if you did a big rehearsal for the dancing scene that you play, because I love it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We had two sources of music. One is history, songs from the past. We had a music supervisor who went through the archives of 19th century music that would have been proper, expected in that part of the world. That music supervisor, I'm happy to say, is my son, Austin Leonard Jones, who is the banjo player on the barge at the end of the movie. He found some very important, rare, old songs for us, and he worked at that very hard. The other source of the music is, of course, Marco Beltrami, who is a very fine composer, who enjoys working with us, even though we don't pay any money, because we are in search of originality in every way that we can get our hands on it. And He's able to do things musically with our company that he wouldn't able to do within what you all have called the system. We invented several different musical instruments to use. We had a thing called the wind piano. He bought an old upright piano and put it on a concrete platform, and from the soundboard on the back, he attached 6 wires and ran them across an arroyo, or what you would call a creek or a draw, 200 feet to a metal water tank, a 25,000 gallon metal water holder, which is empty. You put the microphones inside the water tank, played the piano while the wind blew across the strings. And at the same time, you could take the bow that you would use on a bass or a cello, and you could play those strings, and you could put little clamps on them and make stops that would act like frets. It became a very complicated machine, musical instrument, driven for the most part by the wind. And of course, there's a lot of wind in the movie. They also invented another stringed instrument that had stops at both ends. It was kind of like a steel guitar, but it had a bridge in the middle and a bridge at each end. And if you played one side, the other side would sing to you. And you get sounds that are quite beautiful that no one's ever heard before because the instrument has never existed. And he's quite free in his composition. We didn't have expected moments. We had a list of music cues, but we didn't have the car crash theme. We didn't have the puppy on the freeway theme. You know, we didn't have the broken-hearted teenage girl theme. You know, we had some beautiful images to supply, and the only assignment he had was to be original and find beautiful music to go with it.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur, à droite.
Yes, Eric Kench from Cinema Editor Magazine. My question is for Mr. Jones. I love the lyrical quality to the editing in the film. Could you talk a little bit about your process in editorial and what contributions the editors Roberto Silvi and Lawrence Medeiros brought to the film?
No, they're both good guys, and but it's not really hard work. I don't think it's time consuming. But if you look at the master, you know what a master is? It's a big wide shot that establishes a scene, and then you have coverage, which in which you shoot 2 people looking one way, 2 people looking the other. And then you have medium close-ups and close-ups. And if you look at the dailies of any, if you look at the footage of any day that we've shot, the editing choices are obvious. If you think freely and openly about it, you can really see how to do it. It's not a big puzzle, but it is time consuming.
That's spoken like a brilliant person, because it's not easy like that. If you have an eye that you have, yeah, but I don't think it's I don't know.
Well, they figured it out. Because also, I have a friend named Ron Shelton, who's a pretty good movie director. And when I first started 20 years ago directing movies, I said, what is the best point of view to take with an editor, Ron? And he said, over the shoulder.
Last question at the first row.
Hello, I'm Gwanta Sotitsa from Georgian television. Rustavitu. I have a question to Mr. Tommy Lee Jones as a director. So usually when you have an idea or find a script, how do you understand that this is the right one? What is the main criteria for you? What you want to show to the audience?
I don't know. You look for, again, you look for a door, a window, a pathway to originality is what you look for. And then you go through that door and jump out that window and run down that path.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, and good luck for the screening tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What is this? Oh.
I don't mind.
Guys, I'm going to have to go. This is the last. I'm sorry. Merci. Thank you. Thank you. I have to go. I don't want to get fired. I'm following him.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.